got interrupted and only got 5 minutes in with the legendary Bernard Hopkins. But we're gonna just go through some of his stuff. And like I said before, I'm not gonna go through my own talking with you guys. I want to show you guys what he did and how impressive he was. Um, so one of the ways to go about doing this is to actually go through uh, a number of records that he broke. Okay, but first let's put this in context here. Let's put this in context. Okay, in terms of former or current world titleists or future world titleists, these are the following people that Bernard Hopkins beat. Okay, because as with all things in a career really is made by who you face and who you beat, right? So we have former world champion Lupe Aquino. We have John David Jackson, who was a 154 champ. Glenn Johnson, who was a light heavyweight champ. 168-pound champ. I believe 160-pound champ as well. Simon Brown, great welterweight champ. You know, I believe he also was a super welterweight champ. I think he beat Terry Norris or something like that. Keith Holmes. Felix Trinidad, the great legendary Puerto Rican fighter Felix Trinidad. Carl Daniels, William Joppy, who beat Roberto Duran, Oscar De La Hoya, legendary fighter, Antonio Tarver, the guy who first guy to beat Roy Jones Jr. legitimately, Winky Ronald Wright, difficult 154 pounder, you know, also middleweight champion, Kelly Pavlik, the man. Once Hopkins moved up from 160, he was the dude. Roy Jones Jr. So they were 1-1. They were supposed to fight a third fight, but they never did that. Jean Pascal, great light heavyweight champion. You know, Jean Pascal, I think 3-time light heavyweight champion. Tavares Cloud and Bebert Shuvanov. Okay, those guys were younger guys, much younger than Bernard Hopkins. You see the guys he lost to: Roy Jones Jr., Jermaine Taylor. So that's another guy that he faced. Jermaine Taylor, who I believe is undisputed, as well as I believe he also won a title sometime about 5 years ago. He's a little bit crazy. And you have Joe Kazaki. He lost to him. Legendary fighter, Hall of Famer. Chad Dawson, great light heavyweight champion. And Sergey Kovalev. Okay, so just a handful of guys beat Bernard Hopkins. Okay, and then he drew with Jean Pascal, and he had a no contest against Chad Dawson. Now, let me see if I can put this in perspective. We're talking about 16 world champions there that he beat. Out of the 19 world champions he faced. All right, and that's exceptional. That's incredible. Okay, that's incredible. Okay, I want to show you a little bit more about Bernard Hopkins because we gotta go into some real crazy stuff. Okay, one, he's the longest reigning world middleweight champion. Point blank. Period. Longest reigning world middleweight champion. He reigned for 10 years. 2 months and 7 days. He surpassed Tommy Ryan, who was, for those people who don't know who Tommy Ryan is, he was a fighter in the early 1900s. He surpassed Tommy Ryan for the longest reigning middleweight champion. Okay. He also has the most opponents beaten for a world middleweight championship, which is 18, surpassing Felix Sturm. He also has the most title defenses as a world middleweight champion, which is 20. And mind you, these world middleweight championship defenses are successful defenses. These are consecutive world title defenses. Okay, that surpasses Carlos Monzon. He's also the oldest fighter to ever hold the world middleweight championship. He was 40 years, 6 months, and 1 day, surpassing Sugar Ray Robinson. These are all records we're talking about. He outdid Sugar Ray Robinson by winning both the middleweight and light heavyweight lineal titles. Sugar Ray Robinson had tried to attempt to go against Joey Maxim, another guy that Archie Moore beat twice. He went up against Joey Maxim, and Sugar Ray Robinson lost that fight to Joey Maxim. He would have been the undisputed light heavyweight champion, also the lineal champion. He also became the oldest fighter to ever win a world championship. He was 48 years old, 1 month, 22 days, when he defeated Tavares Clout to win the IBF Light Heavyweight Championship on March 9th, 2013. He surpassed his own record of 46 years, 4 months, and 6 days which he set when he defended Jean Pascal to win the WBC Light Heavyweight Championship on May 11th, 2011. Okay? So he also surpassed the previous record holder was George Foreman. Now here's the interesting thing. See, people only look at when he won a title, but what about how long he held that title, and then when he last had the title? And so he's the oldest fighter to unify titles when he defeated Bieber Shuvanov on April 14, age 49 and 3 months. He remained champion until he was 2 months shy of his 50th birthday, losing to Sergey Kovalev whilst trying to unify for a second time. And mind you guys, Bernard Hopkins, who was 49 years, 10 months old, is the oldest. He's the oldest. He's just the oldest champion ever in the history of boxing. Archie Moore was the oldest living champion when he was stripped of the WBA title when he was 48 years old. Bernard Hopkins surpassed him as well, winning the title, retaining it till he was 49 years and 10 months old. This is ridiculous. I'm telling you, man, it's ridiculous. When he was 51 years old, he fought his last fight against Joe Schmidt Jr., okay? So Bernard Hopkins is not just the longevity. It's the longevity at the highest level. This man was a world champion till he was 49 years and 10 months old. He wasn't just a world champion, sorry, my bad. He was a unified world champion, okay? And as I showed you guys in the video before, you know, this guy was giving Sergey Kovalev as good as he was getting. Kovalev obviously had a heavier right hand, so he dropped him twice. But he couldn't stop him. He couldn't get him out of there. And it's just so incredible what this man has done in his career. I'm going to go through the actual fights, the actual championships, who he actually faced with his championships. And I want you to see, this dude didn't face scrubs. What I mean by that is he didn't have stay busy fights like, you know, Sugar Ray Robinson or like Julio Cesar Chavez or like other throwback fighters who would have these, you know, stay busies in between. Every fight counted, okay? And we're going to go into more detail about this too, but let's just start off with the championships and who he beat to get these championships. Now, the first title he fought for was a vacated title, okay? So, you know, people like to talk about paper champion. No, like I said before in a video before, if you guys have been watching my videos, if you even got through all of those videos, in a video before, I wanted you guys to understand and appreciate you can fight for a vacant title, but it's who you're fighting against for that vacant title. In this case, Roy Jones Jr. vacated that title, and I believe he fought a gentleman by the name of, was it Segundo? Was it Segundo? I believe it was Segundo he fought for his first title shot, who is not here. Okay, he fought a guy named something Segundo. We'll go into it. And this is a title he held for 10 years. From 1995, April 1995 to July 16th. 10 years, about 10 years, 2 months, 10 years, 3 months. Okay. Jermaine Taylor won that title from him when Jermaine Taylor became undisputed, right? So, in 2005, Jermaine Taylor beat him. But, check this out. He held that title for 10 years. Now, the WBC title that he won, I believe the WBC champion was Keith Holmes. He beat Keith Holmes to become the WBC middleweight champion. Okay. And then That was in 2001, April, and then at the end of the year, he fought twice that year, I believe. He beat Felix Trinidad to get the WBA Middleweight Championship. Kinda. And he became a super champion. Okay? And he held that title for 4 years. So both titles he held for about 4 years. Well, it was about 3 years something, whatever. And then he won the WBO title. Now, this is before the WBO was really recognized, but nonetheless. He won the WBO title from Oscar De La Hoya, who had won it from Felix Stern in 2004. September 18th of 2004, he was the WBO champion, and he held that title for less than a year. It was succeeded by Jermaine Taylor. Okay? So, this guy was the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Now, after he became undisputed, he had one or two successful defenses, and then he lost to Jermaine Taylor that title. And I believe he moved up in weight after that. Now, he won the WBC Light Heavyweight Championship from Jean Pascal. I think the first fight was a draw. The second fight, he beat Jean Pascal. And he had that title for about a year. Okay? About a year. Less than a year. He had it. Chad Dawson beat him to get the title. And then he won the IBF title 2 years after that against Tavares Cloud. And again, he held it for about a year and some months. A year and maybe 5 months, 6 months. And he also beat Bibert Shivanov, the WBA light heavyweight champion. And again, he held it for around about a year. Okay, and before he faced Sergey Kovalev. Now, that is pretty impressive. Okay, because we're talking about a guy. Well, I'm going to show you guys how old this dude was, you know, when he was doing all these things. So I'm going to go into Wikipedia and just show you guys how old this guy was when he was doing this. Let me see if I can get his boxing record here. Because the nice thing about the boxing record that he has is that you can see his age when he was doing these things. I mean, just phenomenal fighter, man. Phenomenal fighter. So the first time he won a world title, the IBF title, I believe it was. Like I said before, I think it was against Segundo. The guy's name's going to pop up right about now. Segundo Marcano. Okay? So he won the vacant IBF middleweight title against Segundo Marcano. Now, he won it in 1995. April 25th of 1995. He could have won it in 1994, but he drew with him. And he won the IBF middleweight title at the tender age of 30 years. Now, he had a shot at the title before against Roy Jones Jr. when he was known as the Executioner. When he was 28 years old, he faced Roy Jones Jr. for the same IBF middleweight title. And he was unsuccessful in that attempt. Okay, but he learned a lot from that experience. He was known as the Executioner, and I wish I could just show you guys some footage of him. I guess I can just pop it up on YouTube. But he was a phenomenal fighter, man. Roy Jones Jr. was a phenomenal fighter, and so was Bernard Hopkins. Textbook, textbook accurate, textbook, classical textbook fighter, and good defensive fighter. And as he got older, his defense was showcased a lot more than his offense. Because when he first came out, he was known as the Executioner, was knocking out guys, roughing up guys. He was rough, rugged, but he got more refined, he got more crafty, he got more clever and smarter as he went on. So this guy, 28, got a shot at the world title, and he came up short. This was his 24th fight. He came up short. But in his successive fight, he remember, Bernard Hopkins lost his very first fight. Let me show you guys this. Just like Henry Armstrong, his very first fight he lost. A lot of people don't know that. He faced a gentleman named Clinton Mitchell. And he lost by majority decision, 4-rounder. He was 23 years old. So in his prime, Bernard Hopkins wasn't really as great as he became out of his prime, and he was out of his prime in about his 30s, maybe 35, 36, he was out of his prime already. So this is something that a lot of you guys, and this is why I really want people to study Bernard Hopkins and how he fights, because the way how he fought, defensive, hands up, proper defense, walk to you, smart fighter, pick his shots, more of a pot shotter than a combinational puncher, even though he started off more combinational punching and knocking guys out and getting them out of there. But yeah, this guy started off, losing his very first fight, like Henry Armstrong. Henry Armstrong started off as Henry Melody Jackson. He was Melody Jackson, and he got knocked out in his first fight. Experienced fighter he faced. So there's all of that you got to consider. But after that knockout, you can see he was just knocking people out left, right, and center. There's certain guys he just couldn't get out of there, like Randy Smith was a defensive dude. In a way, defensive genius, because Randy Smith never got knocked out in his entire career, and there's a reason for that. And Hopkins, tried to get him out of there. He didn't, and I guess you live to learn from guys you fight. So anyway, he faced Roy Jones Jr. and again, Hopkins got his defense. So Roy couldn't really get Hopkins out of there. He couldn't really knock him out or anything like that, because Hopkins was defensively sound. Very sound, solid, defensive, all-around boxer. Could fight on the inside, outside, that kind of thing. And Hopkins really started to show those attributes and really shone outside of his prime. So when he was 30 years old, in his prime still, he beat Segundo Mercado on the second attempt. He stopped him in 7 rounds to become the IBF champ of the world. Hold on 1 second, though, people. I got to come back. I just need to... Just hold on 1 second. I'm going to come back at you guys. I'm just going to get some meat. Alright, you're going to have to pardon me for just talking. You'll see the what you need sign. I don't want you guys to see me eating. That's not good. So, Bernard Hopkins, man. So that's where he won it. That was in 1995. He was 30 years old. His first really good fight at middleweight. His first really good defense was against John David Jackson. Everybody knows how good John David Jackson is. How he turned out to be a great 154, 160 pound champion. I don't need to go into that. So, he actually stopped John David Jackson. Okay? Actually stopped him. Which is, again, just another remarkable thing. And then he went on to face, right after that, Glenn Johnson. Another future world champion. And he faced him in July of 1997. So that's 4 months after. Okay? 4 months after. Then he went on to face a Guyanese guy named Andrew Council. And that was another 4 months after. 4 months after he faced him. And then he faced Simon Brown. And Simon Brown wasn't a middleweight. He really wasn't, but it is what it is. Simon Brown was a very good welterweight. Went up to junior middleweight and stopped Terry Norris. I guess he jumped up to middleweight to try his hand at middleweight. Okay? Now, generally speaking, at the age of 33 years old, Our fighter is reaching the end of his prime, generally speaking. Not Bernard Hopkins. Okay? He faced Robert Allen in some theatrics. Threw himself out the ring, in my opinion. Allen was a southpaw. He rematched Allen and he stopped him in the 7th round in 1999. Very crafty dude, though. That Hopkins. He's 34 years old. So, when we stop here, you will notice Hopkins didn't face the best of the best of the best. The only guy that notably was the best of the best that he faced, that was a middleweight, was Roy Jones Jr. This was Hopkins' prime, pretty much. Alright? From 2000 and onwards, Hopkins was no longer in his prime. Right? And this is what makes his career so crazy. Because the guys he started facing from here on in were big name guys. Alright? I think of your Dennis Ugas as well. Alright? Now, one of the things you got to notice with Hopkins was he didn't take a lot of damage. Because of his defense, he didn't take a lot of damage. Okay? And that's a common trait with these dominant fighters who keep on dominating way up into their later years. And everybody goes in on Floyd Mayweather for saying taking punishment isn't cool, but no. Think about it. Okay, so Hopkins anyway takes on Antoine Eccles. Those of you know who Antoine Eccles is. Defends his title against him. This is in December of. He only fights 2 times a year from here on in. So May he fought mandatory, IBF mandatory, and then in December he fought the next mandatory, which was Antoine Eccles. He was a good fighter. He never became world champion, but he was a good fighter. Then after that, he goes on to face the WBC middleweight champion of the world, Pete Holmes. Alright? In a unification fight. And mind you, Keith Holmes is much younger than Bernard Hopkins. He's 36 years old, Hopkins that is. Nowhere near the athletic guy that he used to be. But one of the things Hopkins did, he was still the executioner. He reinvented his style of fighting. So it wasn't just in your face kind of Hopkins anymore. He's very crafty, very wily. He come in with his head. If he could bully you on the inside, he would, and rabbit punch you. But he could also box you on the outside. I try to explain to people all the time, it's all about taking away your opponent's weapons. If you know your opponent fights on the outside, you need to close the distance. If you know your opponent's good on the inside, you need to keep him at bay. And Hopkins understood the pivot work necessary to keep a guy at bay, or to close the distance on a guy. He was a good student of the sport, and where he thought a guy had an edge on him, he would hit you with a low blow. Or he come in with his head, or he clinch you. to lock you up, rabbit punch you, forearm you, etc. He had little crafty things he did, breaking the Marcus of Queensberry rules, get you distracted, gets you out of your game. Wanted to get into your head. You know what I'm saying? Because in boxing, you gotta box smart. Then he faced Felix Trinidad. That's a whole other story and a whole other story for another day. Brilliant stuff. Felix Trinidad was punching like a mule, right? Knocked out William Jaffe, you know, to take the WBA middleweight title. And he had knocked out Fernando Vargas before that at 154. Felix was on a tear. Undefeated at welterweight. Undefeated at 154. Undefeated at 160. You could punch. And he had a decent jab. So how did Hopkins fight him? Kept him at bay. Kept on pivoting around him. Wide pivots. Counter punch. And when the opportunity arose, close the distance, try to get to the inside and work the body. He wasn't trying to clinch up too much in that fight. The game plan worked. In the later rounds, Felix started to tire because he working in his body. Even though Felix protects his body very well with forearm, you can't clinch up on Felix. One thing you can do, you can feint to the head and go to the body. And since Felix is coming to you, he's the stalker, he can walk into shots. So that's how Hopkins break him down round by round till he got him out of there in the 12th and final round. Got him out of there. Spectacular stuff. And again, chess player, thinking steps ahead. Gotta break you down, gotta wear you down. You know? Felix Trinidad was deceptively quick. He was long, he was big, he was strong. And if Hopkins was to go just straight up and down with him, toe to toe, he'd have gotten destroyed. And most of the guys who fought Felix Trinidad, they would get themselves wrapped up in a toe to toe. And that's what cost them the fights. Hopkins knew when to select to go toe to toe. He knew when to box Felix Trinidad, and circle him on the outside. So that's where Hopkins did a phenomenal job of neutralizing Felix Trinidad. And smash the like button if you like what you're hearing. Neutralizing Felix Trinidad, and this was a big name. And remember, Hopkins is only 36 years old. He's 36 years old. That's old. That's ancient. If you guys watch, my community post, Ali was dusted at 36 years old. Way before that. He was, I think, 35, going on 36, when he was dusted by a little guy. A cruiserweight who was not supposed to beat him. Leon Spinks beat him, right? But again, the game plan that was played out by Georgie Benton and Eddie Futch, it worked. Eddie Futch and Georgie Benton was also the guys who were successful against Ali with Ken Norton. So they kind of knew what Ali was good at and what he wasn't. So this is how Leon Spinks was able to beat Ali, because they studied him. They knew what worked with Ali and what didn't work with Ali. And with this new style, this tenacious guy with only 7 fights, pro fights, was able to beat Muhammad Ali because Georgie Benton and Eddie Futch kind of knew what to expect with Muhammad Ali. And he was, of course, 35 years old, 36 years old. when he faced when he faced Leon Spinks. So all of that pushing the pace, etc. Felix Trinidad was what? I think he was 30 years old, 29 or 30 years old. He tried to push the pace on Bernard Hopkins, but Hopkins, unlike Ali, Hopkins knew how to fight on the inside and land body shots to slow down. So okay, so I'm gonna break some knowledge to you guys. If any of you guys that box out there, let me break some knowledge to you. If a guy's faster than you, or if a guy's more tenacious than you, if a guy's coming out with more steam, more power, more speed, if a guy's bigger than you got to slow that guy down, right? You can't afford, especially if you're an older guy, you can't afford to go with that guy toe to toe with that speed. So what do you do? One, you have to first of all make that guy come to you. You don't want to be going to that guy. You don't need that. You need this guy to burn as much energy as possible. You want him to come to you. Second thing, trap set. The trap set must end in a body punch. You want to sap the energy from the opponent, but you also want to sap their mind and make them tired trying to find you. So with Bernard Hopkins at 36 years old, with all that experience, that championship experience he had, he was able to outsmart or outthink, as they say, as Roger Mayweather would say, you outthink his opponent, and had Felix Trinidad doing what Felix Trinidad does best, but probably working against him because he's trying to hunt down Bernard Hopkins, and Bernard Hopkins knew how to use his defense to offset what Felix Trinidad was doing. So he never had Felix Trinidad planting, for example. He was always changing the angle of the blade, what we call the shoulder. The shoulder is the blade. The angle of the blade, so Felix would throw a punch and miss, and then, of course, Hopkins would capitalize, and he would counterpunch him. As Felix began to tire in that fight, I remember Bernard Hopkins being able to clinch him, and when he clinched him, he would turn him and walk him to the ropes. Again, using his physical size, knowing that he is a bona fide middleweight. He used his size against Felix. So there are all many different things you can do to wear a fighter down. One of the things is clinching and then walking them to the ropes, putting your weight down on them on the ropes. All those things are, if you catch them in like they're dipping under your shot, you use your forearm and your body to press down your weight on them. You see Tyson Fury do that. So all these little crafty little tricks of the trade, using your forearm to direct them so they don't have the balance, the equilibrium to throw a shot a certain way. Sometimes you can parry off a shot with your forearm, so they're throwing a shot and you parry it off, and it actually the shot bounces off your arm and throws them off balance. We saw it with Canelo versus Triple G, where Canelo would push Triple G's arm off balance, get Triple G off balance, and Canelo capitalized, but a shot to the gut or whatever. So you want to be able to use these forearms not just for punching, but they're actually also tools you can use to maneuver your opponent. Whether it's body check them like this, or whether it's keep their hands at home by you have the hand out and then you kind of just literally manipulate their hand with your glove or with your forearm. Because these weapons, see, there's a lot of things how people don't understand how you can keep your opponent's hands at home. And I call it body checking, and I call it head checking, and I call it, where your forearms can be used to secure your opponent so they can't even fire back a shot at you because they're off balance. They can't throw the shot. It's just a little nudge. Sometimes you can use the top of your blade to get under them and just bump them a little bit to throw them off balance. And that's just that little time right there is enough for you to land a shot on them. There's just all these little tricks of the trade. And it's all about, in boxing, it's all about angles and body positioning. Particularly body positioning because, and that's why we say, if you are able to get in a position quicker than your opponent, you're going to always have the upper hand. See? But if you don't know how to use that's why guys, Roger Mayweather will always say speed don't mean shit if you don't know how to use it. Power don't mean shit if you don't know how to use it. Because power and speed, they can be good and useful if you have the timing, if you have the placement, if you have the rhythm of your opponent down. If you don't have the rhythm of your opponent down, it doesn't mean nothing. Let me try and break it down in a way that you guys can understand much better, because sometimes you guys don't understand what I'm saying. So, for example, all right, with Hopkins versus Trinidad, for example, Tito, he got the power, right? I I don't know if he had the reach advantage, but he had a 72.5 reach, right? 5'11". He's tall. Hopkins was a little taller. I don't know if Hopkins had a longer reach or not. But here's the thing. Tito was the guy with the power, right? He had the power. He had a good jab, you know. And he's not the most steady guy on his feet. He can get dropped, but mostly he moves the right way. But what did Hopkins do to Tito? What did Hopkins do to Tito? Tito's the one closing the distance on Hopkins. Now you gotta understand something. If you're closing the distance on somebody, if you're walking somebody down, you're actually more vulnerable to get hit than if you were on the back foot letting the opponent come to you. So this is another principle a lot of you guys need to understand. Okay? Canelo's very good at moving his head, moving his upper body. And so he doesn't get hit as much, but he still gets hit. Because once you're closing the distance on somebody, if that person is smart enough and they understand range well enough, they're going to look to tag you and they'll have opportunities to counter you. Okay? So, to try and explain this to you guys so you understand fully what I'm saying, Tito was closing the distance on Hopkins. Now, Hopkins used that opportunity to do two things, very critical, which a lot of boxers do, and they do it intuitively. First one was he was getting Tito's timing. When Tito popped that jab, he was timing Tito's jab. Okay? That's very important to understand. The second thing that he did, and he took away Tito's jab, by the way, before the fight was over. And the second thing he did was he was reading Tito's rhythm, how the little jigs and things that Tito would do as he's trying to find or pressure Hopkins. Okay, so Hopkins is observing all of this behind his shell, behind his blade. He's using the pivot work. You know, he's changing directions. He's going in and out, meaning he's feinting as if he's going to step in, and then he backs off, but he's really moving laterally. And so Tito's got to kind of catch up with him, kind of trying to catch up with him, track him down, catch him up. But Tito's always a step behind because Hopkins is using particular angles and particular movements. It's kind of like Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, right? Anthony Joshua was doing that same in and out feint, you know, and then he comes in and then he actually lands a shot and then he's off at an angle so you can't even counterpunch him. This is what Hopkins was doing. He was pot shotting or stealing shots on Tito. He steal the right hand, you know. And, you know, Hopkins talks about stealing the right hand. You know, he would. So in other words, when you're dealing with a guy who's, let's say you're dealing with a guy who's a great jabber, you're not going to go jab for jab with him. That's stupid. You know, that's what the typical guy would do. No, what you're going to do is you're going to throw a punch at a different angle. Whether it's a counter right or, you know, maybe a looping overhand right or a lead right hand, you want to do that. Again, off the front foot when the opponent least expect it. You want to throw left hooks and check hooks as the opponent is coming in. You want to feint the jab but hook over the jab. So you want to do things, and this is what we call special effects in a certain way because you're coming in off of different angles. You're doing things that are in addition to what the classical style or the traditional approach is, or what we call the foundational work. Now you're adding extra things to that. So how you come in off an angle, how you come in, let's say you feint as if you're coming in off this angle, then you don't, then you come in and you step in off an angle and you come off a different angle. You step in off of one angle like this. You can't even see me, so it don't really matter. But you step in off of one angle like this and you come off another angle. Okay? And so those kinds of subtle things means you're not really standing directly in front of the guy. You have an entry and an exit point. All right? And so you're stealing shots on the guy. It's called pot shotting. And it's one of the hardest things to defend against because you don't know when the guy's going to throw a shot at you. You don't know where he's going to throw that shot at you because he's going to feint as if he's going to go one way and then he's going to go another. Or sometimes he just feint as if he's going to go one way and he does go that way. But it just has a different delay. And the only reason and the only way guys can do that with opponents is because they get their timing and they get their rhythm. So once you get the timing and rhythm of an opponent, now you can start placing your shots and you can start, you know, doing what you do. and you can start feigning them, and they'll bite in your feints and all that kind of stuff. So this is what Hopkins was actually doing in there against Felix Trinidad. Trinidad had the power, but he couldn't use it. Right? He had the power, but he couldn't use it because he didn't have. You can't use your power if you can't locate your. You can't locate the target, right? And to locate the target, the thing that you use to locate your target is a jab. Okay, use a jab. Now you can you can use a lead right hand, you can use a lead left hook to locate your target as well. But the simplest tool, the most fundamental tool that you use to locate your target is a jab. And if you're very good at jabbing, then because you must know the fundamentals first before you can do special effects. Okay, to understand how things work, you must know how to jab. You must know how to jab very, very well. Because you know how to jab very well, you can time your opponent's jab and then you can counter that jab. So, Bernard Hopkins is a counterpuncher, and so he was able to do that to Felix Trinidad. Let me get to the other guy. So that's how he beat Felix Trinidad. Stopped him in the 12th round. He was beating him up for a good period of time. Felix was confused a bit because he had to keep on resetting and changing direction. When you can make your opponent reset, that means they had to start all over from scratch. And there's several different ways to make your opponent reset. You can close the distance on them and be right up on them, so the shot, you have to know what range they're most effective with their punches with. Like Felix Trinidad, he has nice short chopping shots on the inside, and then he has those nice long shots on the outside. But mid range, if you dip below his shots at mid range, you get a counter punch him to the body, and it's, of course, that's where you want to break him down, and you want to be able to hit him where he won't hit you. So you work to the body and then you just bail back out, or work to the body and you clench him up as he's getting tired, and you listen to his breathing. His breathing's more labored. You clench him up, you lock him up, because he can't push you off then. Because all fighters start strong, but as the fight goes along, if you are targeting the right target spots, Mayweather, he targeted the liver. He had that jab to the pit thing that was going on all the time, so he could catch you on the outside, and he very, very likely would not get countered. So there's all these little tricks of the trade that different fighters would use to wear down their opponent. That's why we say it's chess, not checkers. All right, so Bernard Hopkins, man, at the age of 36 years old, you wouldn't think an old guy like that could be able to beat a young guy who's in his 20s, late 20s. He's in the prime of his career. But he was able to do it, and that is remarkable. At the age of 37, Bernard Hopkins defended his unified title. So he had now the IBF, the WBC, the WBA. He was able to defend it against a guy named Carl Daniels, who you guys don't know who that is, and I don't either. Moraid Hakar, I don't know who he is. But then after that, he faced William Joppy, who was the once, I believe, WBA, middleweight champion. So William Joppy was beaten by Felix Trinidad. So Felix Trinidad was the WBA champion. So Felix Trinidad beat William Joppy. So William Joppy got this shot at the middleweight title and unified middleweight titles. He had, and he was able to box Hopkins all the way to the end. Hopkins did not stop him. And William Joppy, as we all know, he beat Roberto Duran. He was a very refined, very good fighter. But again, it's chess, not checkers. Okay, it's chess, not checkers. Now, Bernard Hopkins, when he faced William Joppy, and he beat William Joppy on December 13, 2013, was 38 years old, ladies and gentlemen, almost 39 years old. Do you hear me? Do you understand? This is the age at which, past the age when Joe Louis got dusted by Rocky Marciano, when Muhammad Ali, I got dusted a long time by Larry Holmes. You're talking about Shane Mosley getting dusted by Floyd Mayweather. You're talking about an age where this is the age where most fighters, even great fighters, they had their last hurrah. I mean, Sugar Ray Robinson had his last hurrah at 36. And some of you guys will say, well, Sugar Ray Robinson had a hell of a lot of fights. He had 100 and something fights by then. I'm like, yeah, that's true. He had a lot of fights, but not a lot of fights that put wear and tear on his body. In other words, he was knocking out guys left, right, and center. And, whether it's a 15 rounder, whether it's a 10 rounder, them fights didn't go very long. So Sugar Ray Robinson had a lot of fights, but a lot of his fights didn't go very long. The only fights that he really had, like a tit and tat, was like Jake LaMotta. Gave him some very close fights in his career. Randy Turpin went the distance with him. And he got dropped. I think Randy Turpin dropped him or something like that. You had the Coleman Basilio fight, which was brutal. But other than that, he really didn't have. Sugar Ray Robinson really didn't have a whole lot of fights where it was a lot of wear and tear. He did go. I believe he went 15 with also Kid Gavilan, right? And he had some close fights with some other fighters, some really good fighters like Holly Mims and Henry Brim and Georgie Abrams. These guys, they fought some really close fights, and some of them, Sugar Ray Robinson actually got dropped in some of those fights. But by and large, he wasn't the dude that was taking a lot of damage. So even at the age of 36, I think that's the last time he won the championship and kept it. I think he beat Carmen Basilio. At the age of 36, I think he was still. I mean, pretty brutal fight with Carmen Basilio, but still at the same time, he never really taken that tremendous amount of punishment throughout his career. Even though at the end of the day, he still had CTE. People talk about diabetes and the dementia, but he still had CTE. But he did last pretty long. He lasted like 70 something years, before he died. So, hell of a fighter. All right. But my point is, Bernard Hopkins at 38, Floyd Mayweather was broken down by 38, right? Hopkins be facing some dudes at 38. William Joppy. He faced William Joppy again in his prime. We're talking prime fighters that are like, Hopkins is like what? He's like 10 years older than them guys. Some of them guys like 8 years, 6 years, 7 years older. Okay? He then faced Robert Allen, and he got a unanimous decision over him. And then he became undisputed when he faced Oscar De La Hoya, who was much younger than he was. He was 39 years old, y'all. Almost 40 years old when he faced Oscar De La Hoya. Come on, man. Come on, man. Like, really? The man was almost 40 years old. Let me say that again. By the time he faced Oscar De La Hoya. All right? And he became undisputed champion. This is 10 years from since he won the IBF title. Okay. All right. And then he faced Howard Eastman, who was a good fighter. He's all right. I mean, he never became world champion, but he was a good fighter. And then after that, he lost to Jermaine Taylor by split decision, y'all, at the age of 40 years, 182 days. Okay? Hell of a career he had at, he did rematch Jermaine Taylor. He did not get back the title. In fact, Jermaine Taylor beat him even more comprehensively the second time. And everybody was saying, stupid ass Larry Merchant was saying that, maybe he should retire. I'm like, what? Man, shut up, dude. Anyway, after that fight, he fought Antonio Tarver, who was the lineal champion. He beat Roy Jones Jr. to attain the lineal championship. And Antonio Tarver faced Bernard Hopkins. The fight was at 170. I believe it was 170. Either 170 or 175. I think it was a catchweight fight. I can't remember. But anyway, Hopkins 41 years old. Tarver's nowhere near that. And, I mean, Hopkins beats Antonio Tarver. Nobody believed that would happen. Antonio Tarver is also another very good defensive fighter. Never really take no serious punishment. But in that fight, Hopkins beats Tarver, y'all. I can't even believe I'm saying that. All right, and as you can see, the ring light heavyweight titles there was at stake. WBO wasn't no belt that nobody cared about. Winky Wright, I know this was at a catchweight. This was at 170 pounds, right? Winky Wright coming up from middleweight to face Hopkins. He went up 10 pounds. Hopkins came down 5. Good fight, though. Good fight. Hopkins was able to get the turtle to come out the shell. The trick he had was he would bait him with the jab, stay just out of range so Winky Wright had to go find him. Again, same trick he did with Felix Trinidad. And Winky Wright, when he throw his jab, he would open up his defense and then he could counterpunch. So that's what Hopkins did, and that's how he beat Winky Wright. Again, brilliant stuff. We're talking 42 years old, keeping his body in as good shape as possible. You know, Duke could go, said he could come back down to 160 if he had to, which is interesting. And man, Hopkins did his thing, man. Did his thing. Now against Oscar De La Hoya, he actually fought Oscar De La Hoya at a catchweight, by the way. All right, so he then lost the ring title to Joe Calzaghe. So Joe Calzaghe became the lineal light heavyweight champion of the world. It was a very close fight, split decision loss to Joe Calzaghe. I thought Hopkins actually beat him, even with all the dirty tactics and the clinching and stuff, because he dropped Joe Calzaghe. But they gave Joe Calzaghe anyway the win. That's just my personal opinion. What really stands is what is in the history books, which is that Joe Calzaghe beat his ass. And then after that, he went on to face the undisputed middleweight champion of the world, who was Kelly Pavlik, who just beat Jermaine Taylor, and twice. And Hopkins came on and he put a beating on Kelly Pavlik. You know what I'm saying? He's 43-year-old man putting a beating on Kelly Pavlik. Y'all believe this? Calzaghe beat a 43-year-old man. All right, but this 43-year-old man ain't normal. And that's when he came up with the name The Alien, because I think when he faced Tavares Cloud, no, not yet. All right, so he rematched Roy Jones Jr. He got a win over Roy Jones Jr. when he's 45 years old. And then he faced Jean Pascal. They fought to a draw, I believe it was. The first fight was a draw, yes. And he dropped Jean Pascal, I think it was twice. And Pascal came back, and he got a draw for some reason. And then Pascal rematched him, and Hopkins beat his ass. And he became, again, two-time light heavyweight champion. Well, actually, no. Yes. Two-time light heavyweight champion of the world. Two-time lineal light heavyweight champion of the world. And WBC champion. So he was officially at 46 years old. Get that in your head. 46 years old. He became the WBC lightweight heavyweight champion of the world. That's just some crazy stuff. I can't even believe I'm saying that. Alright, he had no contest against Chad Dawson, and then he faced Chad Dawson again. At 47 years old, he lost to Chad Dawson. And he lost the WBC light heavyweight title. Chad Dawson was a very good fighter, but Chad Dawson went and lost to Andre Ward. Anyway, Hopkins went on to take up the IBF light heavyweight title against Tavares Cloud. Was a good promising fighter, but by then, you're talking about Hopkins got knowledge and experience in the sport of boxing beyond all them guys. So he's just teaching them. He's just schooling them inside that ring. And Tavares Cloud was very promising, very good fighter, but he just didn't have the experience. And Hopkins had way more experience. He had beaten way better fighters. Same thing with Karo Murat. And then Bieber Shubinov, he beat to win the WBA super light heavyweight title. Okay, it was a cakewalk. And he's 49 years. Oh my God, 49 years old, 94 days. All right. And then people talked about Sergey Kovalev, who's the next guy he faced. He faced Sergey Kovalev. He went up against him, and he stopped Sergey Kovalev's knockout streak. So he got knocked out twice in that fight. But he was competitive. At 49 years old, ladies and gentlemen, at 49 years old, he was competitive with a guy who's, less than half his age. All right? It's just ridiculous for me to be saying. So, anyways, Bernard Hopkins, incredible career. Incredible career. Okay, and then look at it back-to-back. We're talking about like almost world champions back-to-back at a certain point in time. He lost to Sergey Kovalev, came back into the sport at 51, and lost to Joe Smith Jr. Now, let me separate Bernard Hopkins from Roberto Duran, because everybody always praised Roberto Duran. Bernard Hopkins should be ranked above Roberto Duran, bar none. Everybody talk about Roberto Duran's great lightweight champion, but who did he beat? Who did he really beat at lightweight? It's only... I only think of 5 guys he beat at lightweight that are worth talking about. Esteban de Jesus, who's not in the Boxing Hall of Fame yet. Edwin Viret boxed his ass off, and I thought he beat him twice. Ernesto Marcel, it wasn't lightweight, but I'm saying. Ken Buchanan, Is Hall of Famer, etc., etc., etc. You got it. Now he beat Cannon under dubious circumstances, even though he was dominating the fight. But Ken Buchanan was coming back. All right. And who was the other guy? Leon, not Leoncio Ortiz. The kid who beat the great Nicaraguan fighter. I forgot what his name is. So anyway, there's only 5 guys he beat out of all those 13 championship fights and all of the fights he had before he became world champion. There's only 5 guys. All right, and he also beat Saul Mambe. I must mention him. I mean Duran was a great fighter. So let me not bash Duran, but dude, Bernard Hopkins, if y'all don't realize how great this guy was, it's not just his longevity. Larry Merchant's an asshole. Okay, Larry Merchant was the guy, and I'm gonna say it again. Y'all can quote me on this. Larry Merchant's an asshole because he would always say, "When are you going to retire? When are you going to retire?" Which is stupid. Like, why you leave the man alone? The man is making records. The man is doing what he's doing. The man loves boxing. Let the man do what he do. When it's time, it's time. And let's imagine a Larry Merchant in the time of Archie Moore. Archie Moore is beating ass, doing so many great things, going up to heavyweight, and an asshole like Larry Merchant saying, "When are you going to retire?" That would be like what's wrong with you? What's your problem? You know what I mean? And Bernard Hopkins wasn't a knockout artist, but he was beautiful when it comes to the sweet science. He was beautiful when it comes to beating opponents. It was beautiful in terms of what boxing is. It's a cerebral game. It's a game of gentlemen, and it's all about 90% mental, 10% physical. Okay, so he wasn't a wrecking ball. He wasn't knocking people out left, right, and center. Andrew Ward either. Floyd Mayweather either. But that doesn't mean that how these guys, you can't appreciate what these guys are doing in the ring. And that's the problem I have with a lot of people out there. Okay, Archie Moore used to knock them out left, right, and center. But my point is, a lot of people out there don't know boxing. They don't appreciate boxing, right? Yet they will praise guys who don't do what Floyd Mayweather do the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. Everybody's praising Lomachenko, right? Lomachenko started knocking out guys, yeah, but he hasn't knocked out a guy in a good minute, all right? They praise him. He has the same boring style, so-called boring style, all right? They praise Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury has the same boring style. He's a boxer. All right, he knocked out Deontay Wilder, but he ain't been knocking out nobody of late. Okay, who's worth anything? Okay, they praise my boy Dimitri Bivol, hell of a boxer. He ain't somebody to knock out everybody left, right, and center either. You know what I'm saying? My point being, we have to learn to appreciate all styles. Now, Bernard Hopkins is a legend. I mean, he's a legend. You look at the names on his resume, right? It's not just Tito. It's not just Felix Trinidad. It's Simon Brown's. It's the Chad. Well, he didn't beat Chad Dawson. It's the Jean Pascal's. Roy Jones Jr. is on his resume. He beat him. Kelly Pavlik. That's a Hall of Famer right there. Winky Wright. That's another Hall of Famer right there. Antonio Tarver. That's another Hall of Famer right there. Okay. So it's not just Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad. William Joppy, that's another Hall of Famer right there. You know what I'm saying? It's not just Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad. Glenn Johnson, John David Jackson. Okay? You got to respect the dude, man. You got to respect what the dude did and how he brought it to the table. And a lot of people don't respect that. They just don't. And longevity, yes, but this is not just longevity. You could talk about Roberto Duran with his longevity, but really and truly, even though he fought near to 50, he wasn't doing shit. Okay? He was world champion for a minute, and then that was it. And that was in his 30s. And then the rest of his career, he ain't doing nothing. He got up to the championship level one more time against William Joppy, and Joppy knocked his ass out. Okay? That's not the case with Bernard Hopkins. This man, for the majority of his career, was a world champion. Okay, you can't, and we're talking about some of the biggest names in boxing at the time he beat. Okay, so all I'm saying is, put some respect on this guy's name. Okay, just because he's alive now in our time and he's moving around, he's promoting with Golden Boy, don't mean this man ain't a legend. This is like Oscar De La Hoya. He's another legend in the sport. You know, and then when you look at the fights that Bernard Hopkins lost, most of those fights he lost were by split decision or close decision. You know, and again, just a tribute to the man's boxing IQ and the abilities that he had, the genius of the man. So I just wanted to feature Bernard Hopkins at this point in time. I think that you know, fighters like him don't get enough praise, and at this point in time, I just wanted to go through his career. I would love to show you guys videos of some of his fights as well, and maybe I'll do that. I'll prepare some videos for you guys to see with the great Bernard Hopkins. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, he was just a dirty fighter, and you know, he used dirty tactics and so." Yeah, he was dirty. First, he said he was dirty. So what? He was a dirty fighter. So what? But he had more than that. It's more than that that made him. He understood. He came from a school of boxing where he understood how to use his smarts and the right game plan to beat opponents. It wasn't just he was dirty. You know, he did some dirty things, obviously, but he used the right game plan to beat his opponents. And he reinvented himself, and he refined his style to deal with the things he couldn't do well anymore. His abilities that were ending. And this is the kind of fighter you want to be. You want to be a fighter that is almost ageless. Like you could continue to fight all in your 50s, 60s, even if it's possible, if they allow you, because you got good defense, because you understand boxing is a sport in which it's all about angles. It's not about speed and quickness and all of that. You get the timing down with your opponent, get the rhythm of your opponent, and you go from there. So I think a lot of people should really study Bernard Hopkins. Oh, I don't need to say it. Goes without saying you need to study Floyd Mayweather. It goes without saying that you need to study fighters like Pernell Whitaker, Charlie Burley, Canelo Alvarez, Terrence Crawford, Jerome Ennis. You know, these are fighters you need to study because they are old school fighters actually, and they begin with the defense. Okay, they begin with the defense, and this is very important. You don't want to be taking shots, unnecessary shots, and flush unnecessary shots in your career. That leads to CTE. That leads to other damages. You saw what happened to Dennis Ugas, and that's what I was trying to explain to you guys. These guys hit hard. They hit very, very hard. Okay, they hit very, very hard. And if you don't ride those punches, if you don't roll with those punches correctly, you will have broken bones. You will have broken ribs, broken bones, etc. You have to learn how to ride those shots. Not just block them, but ride them. So anyway, that's all I got for the great, legendary Bernard Hopkins. I hope you guys enjoyed this session. Don't forget you can leave your comments in the comment section below. I will try and put in my PayPal so you guys can donate to my channel. I will catch you guys later. What you need. Out.